Hello and welcome back to On the House. Today is a very, very special episode. We are joined by the GTM legend Santosh Sharan. And just a little bit of background on Santosh. He started out in software engineering. He's since founded several companies. He's been VP of Product Growth and Strategy at ZoomInfo, President and COO of Apollo, and he's also worked at retention.com and RB2B with Adam Robinson. So, on top of that, he's advised at a number of startups and he's now building his own company, ZeerAI. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome, Santosh. You started out in software engineering. How did you end up in GTM?
Hey, Joseph, great to be here and looking forward to this conversation. So, early on during the dot-com era, I graduated and I went into software engineering. And I did that for 7 or 8 years. And I ended up in a small pharmaceutical startup in Boston, where we did some remarkable innovation in drug development. And I built a lot of that technology. It so happened that 4 years later, we were able to sell the company for like 240 million or so. That was the first time I was part of a startup. I was like in year 5 or 6 of my career as a software engineer. And then when the disbursement checks came, I looked at my check and I looked at everybody else's, and then I realized that to get a bigger piece, I had to switch my career and found companies. So that kind of gave me the motivation to start looking at go to market and so on. So that's when I started my own company. That was my next gig. I went to business school in London and came back and started the company. And when I started company, I realized the importance. I did most of the go to market. I was learning on the job, and I realized that real wealth is built when you sell stuff, not when you build, right? And increasingly since then till now, the mode for companies has shifted from technology or building to go to market, and how you sell and how you position and how you message and how you communicate. And so my career has also shifted. I For a long time I was focused on building the best thing and creating a moat there, and now I'm the businesses I'm part of, I create a moat through positioning and go to market.
Wow, that's interesting. So the moat is in GTM. Has there always been a moat in GTM, or is this like a kind of recent thing? And then I guess my follow up question to that would be: will there forever be a moat here? How do you see it changing in the future?
Yeah, when building was difficult, not everybody could build a remarkably easy to use software. Then there was a moat. You had the best designers or best builders. But with AI and with all the automation tools that we have, building has steadily become easier and easier and more automated, and everybody's software begins to look the same. It's very hard unless you are building like an open AI or something remarkably like different. But then that comes with the cost. Most venture-backed companies are not open AI, right? And so they all look more or less the same. So now, if your product looks the same, then why is it that one product succeed while the other 20 in the same space don't, right? The difference is go to market. So to your question, will this always remain the same? uh, for the time being, I think it'll only get worse, because with AI you can point AI to a product and say make a copy of this product, and then within minutes you'll have a copy of a Salesforce. But then how are you going to sell that to generate $10 billion in revenue, right? Just because you put your own logo to Salesforce replica. And that's where the go to market magic comes. Your trust and the credibility that you create with your customers. If they're willing to give you a shot, how do you maintain that relationship? Some are good at doing it, and in the modern era or the next few years, even go to market is evolving. It's not the same as it was 10, 20 years ago, where even with less trust, somehow automation kicked in the last 10, 15 years, right? Where you didn't need relationship, you didn't need trust, and still people could do business. I think we'll go back to that trust and credibility. And you will just one other point, you will end up in a market category where there used to be 30 vendors and now there are 300, and in future next 2 3 years there's going to be 3,000 vendors, right? Because of AI. It's just so easy to build. So two kid and a laptop, they'll create a copy of Salesforce and start selling. And if they have 2 or 3 customers, they're good. They're happy with that. And then there'll be another team doing the same. So the market will become highly fragmented. Uh, and then within those fragmented market, there will be a few teams that will emerge as leaders, and that will be because of go-to-market, not because of their product differentiation.
I'm with you. So it's not a case of you shouldn't start a business in SaaS anymore, because it's more of a case of the way to separate yourself and make it is through go to market. Is that right? Or would you, if you were starting again today, would you start a SaaS now?
Totally, I would. In a funny way, starting SaaS today is far more easier than before. And I would encourage more people to start SaaS because the barrier to starting a company has gone down because the barrier came from high cost of development, right? And the cost of development has gone down. So everybody is starting a SaaS and you should too, and everybody should, right? But the challenge is people are going to start this business and it'll go nowhere. This is where the folks that can differentiate, because rules of the game has changed. They're just going to be, earlier you were competing with 5 vendors. Now you have to learn to compete with 500 vendors, right? And some very low price vendors, and they will all copy whatever the heck you build. They'll copy it. It's very easy to copy these days, right? So now the rules of the game has changed and it has tilted towards go to market innovation. So I would recommend totally start a SaaS business, uh, but focus a lot on go to market, a lot on social, uh, sort of communicate early, create cohorts, community. So we can talk about some of the go-to-market trends that the next few years it will take our mind share.
Let's do that. We're definitely going to get onto the future. Just before we do, I would love to just dig into a little bit more on obviously your time at ZoomInfo and other places. But you joined ZoomInfo 2012. It was. What stage were they at when you joined? What were kind of the targets and outcomes you wanted to get with them, and what did you do GTM wise? What worked and what didn't work?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate that I have seen, I've joined these companies at the moment of transformation. I've gotten a very good smell test. I can tell when companies are about to go to or transfer, and I love that phase because I feel like that's the phase when you see the best of human potential, where people are very generous, and they are very focused on work. When your business is doubling every year, that's the best time to be part of the business. Not before, not later, because it will plateau at some point. And so when I joined ZoomInfo, they were probably doing like 9 million or so in revenue after 12 years in operation. Not a very happy business, right? After 12 years, and they had plateaued. They didn't seem like they were ever going to make it big, right? And the reason I joined ZoomInfo, this is kind of an inside story. That same year, LinkedIn had gone IPO. So I had invested in LinkedIn and I was reading their prospectus and I got fascinated. They spoke of themselves as a data business. So then went on my Google map and said, which is the nearest data business from my house? And ZoomInfo turned out to be the closest data. And so I showed up and I joined. Um, so I thought ZoomInfo could become the next LinkedIn, even early on. Uh, so I joined at single digit millions. When I left 4 years, 5 years later, we were at closer to 100 million in ARR. And the change that happened was we basically created the modern automation at ZoomInfo, where Prior to ZoomInfo, in order to get access to prospecting data, you had to buy it from DNB, and DNB would charge a gigantic text that file dump for like $300,000 a year. So you had a serious barrier. So like IBM could get data and intelligence, but a startup couldn't afford to work with DNB, right? With ZoomInfo, we lowered that barrier. We went after SMB that DNB was ignoring, right? Um, and we said we'll give you 3 seats of subscription tool, search tool, for like $5,000. So it was like almost like $99 per seat per month. But then we had a $5,000 limit, like a low limit, which when I was at Apollo, I broke that to just $99, right? Um, and that opened up. Whenever you change the pricing and packaging at the lower end, it opens up many use cases of data. Uh, and ironically, competitors would rather flee than fight for that lower end revenue, right? So DNB obviously ignored the lower end SMB revenue. But then the business grew so fast and there were new use cases. And so that we started to go to mid market and then started to take away DNB's enterprise revenue as well. Um, so, in terms of what we did, we kind of automated the whole business. Um, we did a lot of SEO because we got the word out that ZoomInfo exists. Um, yeah, we did some very creative partnerships to get the ZoomInfo data out and integrated with other tools.
Wow. That's really interesting what you say about like the bigger companies are going to be target like bigger kind of ACVs, and you can go after capture the small end of the, and then as companies grow, then they'll, I think ZoomInfo now they're charging kind of on the higher end now, and then there's it opened the door
Exactly.
for newer companies. But it's that thing you're saying about use cases as well. It you can test and you can gather a lot of data from these smaller companies that will help, I guess, as you go up as well. When when you're thinking about creating a GTM strategy for a company, like you go into ZoomInfo, you go into Apollo, are you thinking let's just double down and do what's already working but better, or are you thinking there's actually a playbook that applies to all of them? Like how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, yeah. Every business when I enter, by the way, I did the same thing at Apollo, if you think about it. I just went one step below, right? Said, okay, instead of 5,000, let's unlock it for $49, $99. And then it was a different business, uh and then it unlocked even more use cases, right? But there's a limit to what you can do because I couldn't go to another business and say, okay, let's give away data for free or like $9 a month, and that will unlock even more use cases, right? The reason is this: the same playbook, if it gets overused, it's no longer good. It's no longer valuable, right? Because everybody's using it. So when there is scarcity of data, it's a good idea to create abundance of data, right? But when there's abundance of data, you cannot create even more abundance. You have to look for signals or way to create scarcity of data, right? And then the cycle continues. So when from DNB, there was scarcity of data for certain segment of the market. ZoomInfo created abundance for them, right? And Apollo created even more abundance because SMB still wasn't served with ZoomInfo. They needed minimum of 30K, because that 5K minimum had gone up to 30K after they went IPO, right? So there was artificial scarcity created, which Apollo filled in. But when Apollo did what it did, and a bunch of other vendors too, it actually uh, killed a lot of playbooks that used to work, right? So this is where you feel like you have hit a wall because just creating more access to data is not going to help anymore. And this is why you see companies like Clay doing so well, because now the market is shifting. If when you didn't have data, you would want a file with 100 records to call. But when you can get 10,000 or 100,000 record for free or for $49, now you need signals on which 100 to call out of the 100,000, right? And this is why like signal companies are doing so well, right? So um, yeah, I like to track those macro tectonic shifts. I feel like those patterns tell you which companies to invest in or follow. Um, I feel like I didn't answer your question. I went on a different tangent. Can you repeat your question again?
No, well, that's really interesting what you're saying, because you're saying about, like, there wasn't abundance of data, so people could do outreach and things like that, and be less personalized. And now, obviously, there is a lot of data.
Right.
People are having to use Clay, but what happens when everyone's using Clay? I still see a lot of
Oh,
people are too afraid to use it, and so there's a bit of a barrier there. But
yeah, yeah, totally. That'll happen. And what I love about our the world we live in is where things would happen slowly. Now it happens very fast. So the life cycle of these trends are very rapid, right? So you're absolutely right. There will be abundance of signals someday. Um, what will happen next? I feel like there's going to be meta signals. So these are like, we are looking at what the signals we look at today are micro signals or individual signals, right? So is there a funding event? Is there a new product? Did the company went through layoffs? And we try to infer something out of that. With AI, I think we'll reach a world where there'll be hundreds of thousands of these signals. We'll not be able to make sense ourselves. And then there'll be meta signals where we'll have AI look at hundreds of signal and deduce something like, is there demand for my product? Just give me nobody's Clay is not working on it, but hopefully eventually we'll see some initiatives around making sense of hundreds of signals. But they will take the front seat than give me a phone number and email address, because that'll be taken for granted.
interesting. Yeah, it's almost, I like this idea of meta signals, because it's like, instead of one signal, it's like each signal on its own, you might not go and reach out, but it kind of paints a picture of all these actions people are doing everywhere. Um, wow, that's interesting. There's a new startup there. That's great. And then, because so back to ZoomInfo. Where do you think ZoomInfo will be in 10 years' time?
So companies, when they get into these stage, um, like ZoomInfo is, I feel like ZoomInfo is beginning to look a lot like DNB. DNB is a great business. It just doesn't grow, right? It's giving off like billion and a half or so in revenue, which is not something to sneeze at. ZoomInfo is highly profitable, generating a ton of revenue. Um, I feel like businesses, they go from offensive to defensive, right? So when they're offensive, they're eating up on somebody else's market share. They're growing. Um, they're they're innovating, and then they get into very defensive state where they have to protect their margins and just like billion and a half, you have to protect that uh, rather than yeah. I find it's very difficult to grow now, not impossible, uh, because ZoomInfo still has some of the best assets in the market amongst all of the companies, and market is evolving very rapidly. If they can keep up with the innovation, keep ahead of what's happening in the market, they can certainly have the first right of refusal on that revenue. But it gets more and more difficult as the company grows. And yeah, I don't think ZoomInfo will go out of business by any means. Um, I feel like just like DNB has been doing similar revenue for like last decade, I feel like ZoomInfo becomes DNB part two. So they'll continue to be a big business. But at the same time, there may be other companies that could pop up that'll become ZoomInfo part two, right? Which get into billion-dollar revenue, doing something completely new. Um, uh, around, I think we will look at data very differently than what we, maybe that is the better question, or what's going to happen to the market and where will the new opportunities come from. I think ZoomInfo and other companies in this space, the way they look at data is a bit of a legacy. I think the future consists of meta signals and synthetic data. So they look at data as, if you think about what is data, it's a representation of a reality, right? When we are selling, we want some representation of what's out there, so that we can programmatically run some simulation or get reach out. So we are trying to connect our world and workflows to what is reality, right? Synthetic data starts to complete that picture because we have a lot of missing holes everywhere in data, right? Now with AI and so much of data, we can model it and create artificial data, and data to start predicting future outcomes, right? Those are the data that I don't think ZoomInfo or other companies have. They're focused more on like what is the most accurate email or phone or title. But I think that will be taken for granted for the large part. I wouldn't be surprised if, say, LinkedIn starts selling that data directly to consumers, and that'll kill a lot of the data business, right? So, yeah, there are many things that can happen between now and then, but I think in the future, uh, I'm almost certain the kind of data companies that will emerge will not be the ones focusing on legacy data.
And can the big companies like ZoomInfo, like they've got access to a lot of data, can they add data to that, or is it just too big? Like it needs to be a smaller company that starts something up. Do you think?
It's History tells us that it's always more likely uh, smaller companies that build this. But having said that, ZoomInfo has innovated in the past, and they have been ahead of the curve. So there's a good chance that they could pull this off. They certainly have the best assets in the space, right?
Yeah,
And the best customers as well. Better than D&B in some cases for use cases like this.
awesome. That's great. And I'm going to ask you a really similar question for Apollo. We talked a little bit about Apollo already, but I think it's good to go a little bit more in depth. So, how did you end up at Apollo? What was the story there? Obviously, you talked about the pricing, but what was your overall strategy? What did you do? What lessons did you take? Just a little bit more about your experience there would be amazing.
Yeah. So you asked earlier, is there a playbook to kind of grow companies? Can you apply the same playbook to every company, right? Oftentimes, companies succeed uh, if they follow the organizational DNA. So the founders create that organizational DNA, right? For instance, some companies are great at technology and engineering, others are great at go to market, right? And that's a reflection of the founders and the core team and so on. Um, so with Apollo, they are a very engineering focused team. They were great at building engineering or tools and self-serve tools and so on. Um, not so when you are going after enterprise market, you need more of go to market, right? But when you are good at engineering, not at so good at go to market, then it's best to do PLG or self-serve or go after SMB that don't demand as much attention, right? So the best playbooks to grow a business is to play on your own strength, right? Not try to do what your competitors are doing or try to follow and uh, try to cover your weakness, right? Instead, you have to play on it. So I think that is the reason why Apollo succeeded in their approach because they were playing on this strength. As a PLG company, you have to be highly technical, look into details. It wasn't because of data or any other difference, right? But also the market needed someone to unlock the value further for SMB, right? So ZoomInfo by that time had made the minimum floor to 30K. Meanwhile, there was SMBs that wanted data for like $99, $50 a month. Somebody had to provide it. So Apollo just happened to be at that. Now, the kind of business you build around a PLG, where people are paying like $59 a month versus, say, ZoomInfo's average ACV of like 30K, 50K a year, um, very different business, right? You don't need enterprise sellers. You need low cost sellers, potentially not even in the US, in low cost territories. You need a lot of support staff, but not expensive CS staff. So the configuration of the business is very different. Um, and you also need to get the word out, very viral type approach where people are sharing. So there's like a slightly consumerization of both signups, activation, and onboarding. Um, yeah, so those are at Apollo. I think Apollo managed to do it well. Um, it's not easy to get those mix right. There were many companies that were selling. By the way, when I was at Apollo, there were at least 4 or 5 companies that had self-serve tool for $99 a month. But here's the key difference. Apollo focused all its energy into this $99 a month and becoming a PLG company. But all those other companies were selling $99, but they knew that the only way revenues will come, 90% of the revenue was through enterprise. So they were still trying to compete with ZoomInfo for the bigger deals. And then they were failing at it because ZoomInfo was, you couldn't compete with ZoomInfo, right? And then 99 was just like on the side, like an exhaust of their system, right? What Apollo did is said, this is all we do, right? We wouldn't worry about the competing with Zoom. I think that was the big I think strategy. It's when you're growing, you also need to take bets and go all in, because when you go all in, it shows in your strategy, in your content, in your marketing material. It doesn't it demonstrates conviction. Otherwise, if you're doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, your buyers figure this out and they you look confused. Your brand looks like it lacks clarity.
That's interesting. It's 'cause, like, if you is it the beachhead? I've heard something called the beachhead strategy. Is right. You're really focusing on one, but it's like if you're Apollo and you're going to go for one, it's like you got to have a good strong feeling that this is the problem to go after, and then your customers are going to pick up on that. Or like you say, if you just try a bit of everything, it shows lack of conviction. Um, yeah, that's really interesting, and doubling down on your strengths as well. Moving on to retention. Obviously, you advised at retention.com for 1 year, I think, and then joined them 1 year later.
Yeah.
um was Adam already kind of doubling down on that, or did you help him with that
Yeah.
strategy?
So when I advise retention, they were mostly into e-commerce. Um, and when I joined, that's when we started our B2B. So my background has been more in B2B, and retention was doing something similar to our B2B, but for e-commerce, right? Which was B2C. So I joined full time to help him create that RB2B business. And that was an excellent learning experience as well. And Adam is just so good at marketing. We gave ourselves a challenge and we said, let's build a business that would be as profitable, as frugal as possible, and we'll do it right from day one. Like in the design stage, we said, how can we create a business with like 2 people, 3 people, like very few, even if it scales at 10 million revenue or so on, right? So we were thinking not as a after, if, and to me this was kind of new because I never had to think about extreme automation at any of the other businesses I've been part of, right? And that forces you to think right from day one on how you'd run the business. So for instance, let's say at Apollo, when people started signing up, the business started growing. Um, we ended up hiring support staff like almost 50 to 100 in Colombia or neighboring regions. That was a big team of like of just for support because so many people are signing up, right? So at our B2B, we thought, how can we have just one support person, even if we have similar volume, right? Where other companies are hiring 50 or 100 support people, right? And thankfully, AI, we were doing this in the time of AI. So a lot of that was already solved for us. We just had to incorporate early on. So we found Rob, this guy that was semi-technical, and we told him on day one that we are not going to hire anyone else. So he started creating automation before our B2B was launched, and plumbing to do automated support with intercom fin and so on. Um, yeah, so we created this business. There were a lot of learnings, uh, which I would probably do a few things differently. Uh, but like everything else, success comes in different shades and colors. Hindsight is great in terms of learning. Yeah, I've had learning from all my other venture. That's what I like about these experiments. If I had to go back, I would do many things differently. But yeah, the RB2B was an incredible success. The genius of RB2B is even today, it does 6.5 million. Um, it has only three people running it. It's like super profitable. The part where I feel like it could have been a $20 million business. Um, and I do think about why did it stop at the slow down at like six and a half. Uh, so yeah, some of my learnings are around that.
That's interesting. I kind of related to what you just said, but if I know you have done a lot of work helping companies go from 5 to 25 million. You're doing 0 to 1 at the moment. Do you think that the 0 to 1 playbook is target the SMBs, and that's why our B2B is flatlined a little bit, and it's actually you just need to move up market, or have I spoken utter
Yeah, so
nonsense there?
right, right. And this applies to all the businesses I've been part of, even businesses that have grown to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. What got you here doesn't get you there. But the team just gets used to running the business the same way they ran before. We humans have tremendous cognitive bias or confirmation bias. If we have been successful doing X things, we think the future success will come from doing more of the X. We don't realize that there's a limitation to every strategy. It plateaus. It's like an S curve, right? You want to take advantage when it's growing, but then it'll plateau and you need a new S curve and a new one and a new one, right? But we humans don't. We kind of fall into our comfort zones, and um, so back to our B2B. I think our B2B was incredibly successful in getting not just from 0 to 1, but $0 to $5 million. Like within 3 months, we were already doing several million. And kudos to the outreach that we did. And, Adam, more than me or anyone else in the team, he's just a machine to kind of outreach, right? We couldn't have gotten this fast to several million in revenue without the outreach. Now, the same outreach created a ton of competitors because it seemed like the gold rush that we went out and we shared all our details to everyone, and there were like literally 10 copycats. And this is also happening with every business, by the way. You launch and you talk about it, and because LinkedIn is the best way to commit, and then people copy, and before you know, there are, so by month 10, 12, there were 10 other businesses all doing 3 to 5 million in revenue. That could have been RP to, because they were the first, we were the first to do this. So within a year, we created like 5 to 10 competition, all doing this. They're all still a little bit behind RB2B in revenue, but yeah, the it ended up in a very fragmented long tail market, um, and we should have figured out how to consolidate that. And it is difficult. I mean, the trends. We are also hyper connected. Um, it's very difficult to, and I worry future businesses that I create will have the same tendency, where if it's a good idea, it'll get copied and immediately, and whatever we copy, somebody will copy that replica, copies of copies, and then everybody will take 1 or 2 million, 5 million of the market, and then before you get a chance to grow, like your market is already split into like 20 different vendors, and that's like a business problem that is emerging.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like when it comes back to what you're saying about, a strategy that works now, it's like an S curve. It's like when you're ahead of everybody else, you actually you don't keep it to yourself. You tell everyone because you're giving value.
Right.
That is a great way to give value to people. But then word's going to spread quickly. So it's you
Right.
just got to have this mentality of like never kind of settling. Just stacking the S's on top of each other. What what do you think is going to be the lever to help RB2B get to the next level? What do you think's blocking it? Do you think it's competition or do you think it's something else?
So I have thought long and hard about, if I had to do this again, what would I do? Because if you don't talk about your business, then you don't grow so fast to begin with, right? So uh, talking on LinkedIn, like stopping to talk is not the right answer. But then when you talk, people are going to copy all you. So I have, uh, so here is, if I had to do this again, or if I'm doing future businesses, first I will try to build not just one app. By the time one app gets copied, so I look at it as a S curve, right? Once it goes to the top of the S, it'll plateau, right? I would launch another app that takes advantage. So I will always think in terms of platform and a compound startup, because future is uh, all about compound startup. And here's why, another reason why this compound startup mentality is so important. CAC is rising, right? When you have 3,000 tools in the same space, or a lot more, then finding a customer, the cost of finding a customer keeps going higher and higher, right? So then what you do is, once you find a customer, sell them more stuff rather than just one. So that way it gets cost CAC gets subsidized across multiple tools, right? I do think, um, to your question, what could grow these businesses, platform where apps are interconnected, where data flows through each other, and then proprietary data. So if I end up collecting and leveraging data that nobody else has access to, that creates an edge. um, but all this requires a focus, like a change in thinking. From the thinking 10 years ago was, I'm going to be the best of the breed. I'll do one thin slice, but do the best, better than anyone else, right? That assumes that CAC is still manageable, right? But when CAC gets so high that your app becomes unsustainable, I think you have to go into all-in-one strategy, which is where you see many successful startups doing everything and taking away a lot of the adjacent workflows as well.
Wow. That's really interesting. I want us to be able to talk a little bit about Zir, and I obviously want to be respectful and make sure you can land your next meeting. So, Zero AI, I think the problem that I've seen you talk about you're trying to solve is GTM is broken. Why is GTM broken? And how does Zir solve that problem?
Yeah, so I have taken up a difficult problem to solve. It's um, so our greed of automation and uh, the accessibility of automation, it kind of broke GTM. So what worked earlier, the same automation and data that was perfectly good as long as not everybody didn't have access to. But now that everybody has access to, everyone thinks I'm only sending 10,000 email, a few thousand. What damage can it do? Turns out millions of other companies are also sending the same 10,000 email to the same buyers. Now it's doing a lot of damage because buyers are just shut down and they're like fatigued and they don't want to engage, right? So individually, it seems like makes perfect sense. It's best practice. Every rep wants to replicate those best. There are a lot of books written on it, a lot of webinars and teaching material. So nobody's mistake. But what worked earlier no longer works. Everybody's pipe is down. The conversions are down. It's like buyers are refusing to show up on calls. They when they do show up, they already have one or two vendor in mind, so they're just turning sales call into fulfillment calls and so on, right? So then, what is the solution? Um, I think it's time to not think about incremental innovation where I can create one new signal or one new data to uh, and there are rooms to do that. So even when there's fatigue, a lot of those hyper personalized emails and so on are still making through, right? And they will, but that's not the. I'm thinking about the holistic solution for the industry. Um, I think where we need to head is where buyers raise their hand. So increasingly, what's happened in the last 7 years, if you think about the buyer's perspective, right? Buyers have been getting frustrated for it's not overnight. Last 5 7 years, these trends happen over decades, right? So they have been doing their research on any company that helped them do their research, got very high valuations. So look at it. So company websites is where they started doing research. Then G2 and review sites came along. Now G2's valuation hit billions of dollars in no time, right? Because buyers didn't want to talk to sales rep; they wanted to do it over G2. Gartner's valuation hit big time because enterprise buyers wanted to talk to Gartner than talk to a vendor, right? Now both G2 and Gartner's valuation has crashed since January. It has dropped like 70% or traffic of G2 and Gartner's valuation. Now, why is that so? Buyers are doing, buyers still don't want to talk to sales rep and do research. They're all doing research on AI and ChatGPT, right? So, um, we are building a new tool where buyers can, and a proprietary buyer intelligence data, where we want to become the AI Gartner, AI G2, where buyers can come to us and ask all kinds of questions about their business. Maybe we should have stayed with just product, but we took a elevated view. But in the process, we also recommend them some products, and we use a lot of AI agent and proprietary data to do this buyer and seller kind of interaction. We think that world where you had a 2 by 2 grid for every category and everybody had to buy a Salesforce or a HubSpot, that time has gone. Now we are creating a 2 by 2 category, 2 by 2 grids for every company that's personalized to your business. So every company should buy a CRM that's hyper personalized to their needs, right? There cannot be one CRM good for everyone, right? Those days are gone. So we are building tools to facilitate that. One last thing, we are also building buyer agents where we want an AI agent to reach out to a seller and carry out a conversation and receive a discovery pitch and listen to a demo and do that with 10 other sellers and then come back and recommend the buyer. Um, we are not taking away or automating the buying and selling process. We're just reducing noise on the seller side. So they do a few calls and they get a very highly engaged lead. On the buyer side, we are trying to automate that process. So we help them find the best fit tool and not end up buying the tool that has the most marketing investments.
Wow. So will the moat go back to building then for companies if this happens because it comes down to the quality of the tool and who it's for, essentially.
Yeah, actually, what we are finding, uh, this is this is strange. So we went around. We wanted to find the best fit tool, right? So we went and uh, scraped everybody's website to understand. Say there are 300 vendor in a category, or there are 850 CRM vendors, let's say. So we went to everyone's website and said, okay, we know who the buyer is. Let's say it's an agent, mid-sized agency. So let's read what they say, how their tool is pitched on their website. What we found is every vendor is saying we are good at every market segment. We are good for SMB, we are good for enterprise, we are good for mid-market. They don't want to lose any deal, right? That is a really bad approach. I mean, that worked so far because it was a seller-led approach. But what buyers are looking for, I think where the future lies, is some vendors saying, hey, we are the best for mid-market agencies, right? And taking a stake and then focusing only on agencies and becoming the CRM for agencies, and then ignoring the rest of the market. But ironically, that's not how go to market works. But I think a lot of the innovation in go to market will happen in product marketing. And those days of uh, when Gartner could position you as one of the leaders in their 2 by 2 or Forrester Wave or so on, then these companies wanted all the market share for themselves. It was like winner take all, right? And it worked for a while, right? But now that is not going to be the case in future. And this, I think, it requires a little bit of go-to-market innovation to pick the right space and be really good at it. And hopefully, that will we will play a role in that as well.
Oh, that's great because it's just encouraging more and more companies. Like, you can have more CRMs in a category because it's like you're really like the master of a niche essentially. Like everyone kind of wins. The buyer wins. People win. Like entrepreneurs
Right.
win. Um, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
you could even call that a sub vertical, right? We were thinking about horizontal SaaS startups. But now instead of calling CRM as everybody, there are 800 CRM. Now there will be 100 different category of CRM, and each category will have 20 vendors, right? There will be one for legal, one for e-com, like another for like tech companies versus manufacturing companies versus poultry farms. Maybe one for lawnmowers. Like there could be a CRM for everyone, right? And that's how the market will reorganize itself, where it will again make sense. A lawnmower will not look at Salesforce or like horizontal. They'll only look at the 3 or 4 lawnmower CRMs that they have.
Wow, there's a lot of opportunity then for people right now, which is good. Final quick question for you then. So, someone wants to find out more about Zero or get in touch with you. Where should they go, and how can they follow you and follow Zero?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. And my email is santosh@zier.ai. And I love talking to everybody in the market. I think that's how I learn most of the time. So please do reach out if you have question or if you want to share on anything that we spoke about today.
I love that. I'll put the links in the description. And just want to say, like, it's been amazing having you on today and speaking with you, Santosh. Like, loads of great nuggets, and just appreciate you for coming on and sharing.
Thank you, sir. I enjoyed this conversation.